Welcome everyone to Griever's Guide to Father's Day, an event hosted by UL's Wander Community. The Wander Community is a space to gather as we all navigate through grief, to convene leaders, professionals, writers, authors, thought leaders in the death and grief spaces, so the audiences like y'all can feel actively supported as you move through life after a death loss. So like I said, I am Elisa Fornering. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a convener, a consultant, a speaker, and an educator working in the grief space. I personally got into this work after my mom died in 2016, and ever since I've been actively working primarily to amplify the resources and works of people like the wonderful people that we have in our room today. So tonight we are here to talk about Father's Day. It's around the corner. And for those of us here who have lost a father or a father figure, it can turn into quite a complicated holiday. We can feel pressure, sadness, frustration, numbness, all kinds of negative feels that make this week particularly challenging. We can also feel like we need a release, that we need laughs, we need a break, we need time with family, friends, whatever it is. And what matters, in my opinion, around these holidays is that what we need is that we can feel validated in whatever it is that we're experiencing. So that's why I've gathered us here tonight. So now I'm going to introduce each of our guests, and then I'm also offering a prompt to each of our guests tonight. So the prompt is, what have you done this week to care for yourself? And I'm gonna start with Sarah, Faith Alderman. So she is the author of the memoir, Let's Never Talk About This Again. Lauded as by Time as one of the must-read books of 2020. The book is about her relationship with her father, Ira, a prudish punster with a smutty secret who died of complications from Alzheimer's disease in 2015. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times McSweeney's, the Boston Globe, the Boston Phoenix, and Modern Losses anthology, which is lovely. She is a longtime producer of Mortified, which invites adults to read from their really awkward, really real teenage diaries, which I have attended and love. Awesome. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I want to pass that question to you. What have you done to care for yourself this week?
Thank you so much for having me. It's funny, I have two little boys. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, which if there are any parents present might understand when I say that I haven't slept in about 6 years. And so for me, sleep has been a huge part of just my mental health and my grief process and just day-to-day struggle. And so this week I finished sleep training my toddler, like fully done. He's sleeping through the night, and it's like so lame that I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, I slept for 8 hours. That's the biggest thing happening, but that's what it was. And it has been incredible. So I'm like super pumped about it. I will talk about it for an hour if you want, but that is what I have done for self-care is I sleep trained my kid. I closed the door, came in the morning. It was great.
Thank you. I think getting any kind of sleep as a win is very fair to celebrate. And yeah, so cheers to that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Next is Claire. So Claire is a renowned grief expert and author. After losing both of her parents at a young age, Claire was drawn to helping others navigate the grief process. A former therapist in private practice, she has counseled thousands of people and written 3 books about grief and loss. Claire speaks and lectures widely and runs a series of different programs designed to help others move through loss. Claire hosts a popular virtual series for Let's Reimagine Death organization, which she interviews notable figures in the death and grief space. And Claire's 3 books of nonfiction, The Rules of Inheritance, After This, When Life is Over, Where Do We Go, and Anxiety, The Missing Stage of Grief, have been published in 18 countries and received many accolades and critical praise. So Claire, thank you for joining tonight. And I pass again that question to you. How have you cared for yourself this week?
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be with all of you guys. I have cared for myself. I just went on a little trip with my 3 kids and our best friends, and we just spent 3 days in a hotel pool, and it was deliriously wonderful. So I have been doing self-care in that way this week.
Thank you. I like that. Deliriously wonderful. I really appreciate that language. So thank you. Thanks for joining
Yeah.
us, especially in the midst of a trip back home. So
Yeah, I'm halfway back home on our road trip.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Mikhail Harris is a licensed psychologist and health service provider, currently serving in private practice in the Mid-South, offering psychological evaluation and support to children, adolescents, and families. She also offers training and education, consultative and supervisory services to several local organizations throughout the Memphis area. So pre and postdoctorally trained at Children's Hospital LA, Dr. Harris specializes in coping adjustment to acute and chronic illness, grief and loss, and health-related trauma. Thank you. She is a TEDx speaker, blogger, magazine and podcast contributor, and author of a memoir, Relaxing into the Pain, My Journey into Grief and Beyond. So thank you for joining tonight. And again, I'll pass that question to you. How have you been caring for yourself this week in the heat in the Mid-South?
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so grateful to be here. And every time I hear that bio, I think, who is that? So I just appreciate the introduction. So next Thursday is actually my dad's birthday. And my dad passed away in March of 2020. And so this week I decided, you know what? I am pushing all my appointments back. I'm saying no to a lot of stuff so that I can just sort of engage in slower rhythms. And so today I woke up at 10 a.m. I saw one person and then I came back home and here I am. And that is, what is it? Gloriously delightful.
Deliriously wonderful.
Deliriously wonderful. Oh, that was close.
I like gloriously delightful. That's good.
Yeah.
It can be
And
all.
so just slowing things down and being okay with taking things slowly this week has really been the best self-care that I could have asked for.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the word you said, the pacing, like recognizing when the pacing needs to change at certain times of year. So with that, I'd like to open with my first question that I asked on Mother's Day as well, which is, what are some of the reasons why Father's Day might feel particularly hard this year? When thinking about the last year that we've had, when thinking about everything going on. And I'll open that, really, we're here to have like a casual conversation. So I'll open it to all three of you. If you have any thoughts on why this year, this month might be particularly hard for people.
You go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say that I think for me, I was giving this question a lot of thought earlier today, and we can't be with anyone, right? I mean, things are sort of starting to open up, but for me, this has been a really painful reminder of the fact that I can't be with the people that I love anyway, and I really can't be with my dad. My dad died in 2015. We're coming up on the anniversary. His birthday is around the corner as well. And, I think a lot about how I don't have the opportunity to ever see him again and to physically be with him. And this year, just after a year plus spent of not being able to physically be with the other people that I love and want to spend time with and want to make meaningful memories with, it was just, I don't know, it was like a 1-2 gut punch reminder of, oh yeah, you can't see anybody, not just this one person that you sort of long to spend more time with, if that makes sense.
I was thinking similar, but almost that things are reopening. And so even today for Reimagine, I interviewed author Kate Fagan, and her dad died 2 years ago. And so I asked her how Father's Day was going to be this year. And she said last year she felt like she got to skip it because it was during the pandemic. And this year she's in Charleston, South Carolina, and everybody's back out and about. She was like, this year it's harder because I can see everybody going back out to celebrate. And so I'm not able to ignore it this year the way I kind of was last year.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking about it in terms of that.
Yeah, and I'll add sort of to piggyback on what Sarah was saying. 2020 was so unique in that I think what it did is just elevate the conversation around death. Just turning our TV on and seeing the number of cases rising and the number of deaths so many more people are sort of at this place where they may have experienced loss. And again, not being able to have that support from a social perspective, it's just really, really challenging. So I'm thankful that, we will have this reopening process, but at the same time, it's not quite the same. And I can speak for myself. It's just been hard to feel supported in the midst of loss because everything's closed and we can't do things that we used to.
Yeah. I also think that after a year plus of Zoom and virtual events and virtual gatherings, we're all tired of this, right? And it is nice that things are starting to open and we can experience our friendships and relationships in person again, sort of tentatively. But man, a year ago, I would have joined up on a Zoom call with my mom or, maybe my husband's family, something to all kind of connect. And I just don't want to do that anymore. I'm just so tired of seeing people on a computer. Sorry, everybody. Thank you for being here. By the way, I appreciate you pushing through this game fatigue. But, for me, that this sort of like enduring need to connect with people in this kind of two-dimensional way is wearing on me to the point where, I think that makes any holiday or milestone harder now because I just like crave even more like physical presence. And so I think I'm just end of my rope with the Zoom stuff.
You're done. You're roll done. Thank you for joining us tonight because I get it. No, no, I think that's all so real. It's like I really resonate with the piece that you said, Claire, about like last year it kind of felt like we got to skip stuff, and now it's just everyone's ready to hit the ground running again, full force. And I'm curious, what are, as y'all have navigated Father's Days before without your dad around, what are some of the things that you have to remind yourself about at this time of year, whether that's something that you need to say like, okay, I feel like crap today, I need to remind myself that that is okay, or are there things that come up that you have to sort of check in with yourself and remind yourself about coming up to this holiday?
Yeah, I'll start with that. So Facebook has this really incredible feature that's also very annoying, which is the memory thing. And so that has been very difficult. As I mentioned, my dad died about a year and 3 months ago. And so the constant memory, I have to remind myself that my dad died on more days than not, because not only am I thinking about him, but I'm also getting these visuals of memories that came up from last year and in prior years and so forth. And so at some point a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I've just got to mute that feature because I found myself picking up the phone, dialing his number, then thinking, oh my God, he's not going to answer. So that's been really difficult to sort of wrap my mind around. Yeah, that's what's making Father's Day a little bit more prickly, if you will.
I think for me, and by the way, congratulations on making it through the first year. I felt like the first year of grief for me after my father died, every milestone just felt like, horrible, and I felt like the on the 1 year anniversary of my father's death, I went hiking with my husband and I literally ran down a mountain when it was done. And it was like the most liberating feeling in the world of, oh, I made it up the mountain of, year-long milestones, and I can run down it. But I thought the first year was really incredibly painful in ways that have evolved. Congratulations. That's like a weird thing to congratulate you on. Right?
I get it.
I think that for me, the further away I get from my father's death, the more I find myself like manufacturing ways that I want to honor him. My family was really big into traditions, and not in a traditional sense. Like we weren't religious. We didn't do sort of traditional holidays, but we had like quirky things, right? Like for my birthday, my dad always got like outrageous cakes. And for my mom's, for Mother's Day, we had all these like wildflowers growing at the end of our street. So my brother and I would go and collect them and make these like elaborate necklaces for her, just like silly things like that. And so part of my coping process has been to try and like do stuff to memorialize my father. And I have to remind myself as I get further and further away from his death that like he actually wouldn't want that at all. He was not a person who liked a fuss made about him. He would never want me to like build a monument for him, or like he wouldn't want a day named for him or something. And so I have to kind of remind myself to stop being so extra about my father's death in a way to honor him, and like to just kind of remember him the way that he would want to be remembered, or you know, celebrate the holiday the way that he would want to, which is to just like stay home and not really do anything. So you know, that's it for me, is not try and like manufacture this artificial way to kind of memorialize a person who just like didn't want any of that, you know, because I think when you start to kind of do things in someone's name that don't feel like them, it actually doesn't do their memory a service in any way.
Mm.
I think that's great. I feel like every year for me, it's different. My father's been gone for 18 years, so a long time, most of my adult life. And I think every year, you know, these holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, Father's Day, so I always feel different. Some years I do really want to memorialize him and do things and honor him and create meaningful things, or go to a restaurant that he loved, or you know, like buy a Father's Day card anyway and write in it. And then some years I just don't want to care, and I just want to like skip it, and I don't want to make a big deal about it. And then some years I'm somewhere in between that. And I guess the thing I remind myself most is that it's okay to not have to have it be exactly the same every year, and to just kind of go with however I'm feeling, and to always look for support if that is something, if it is a hard year, to like always look and ask for support.
It can be so exhausting, I think, to try and, you know, do right by someone who has died, right? To try and do the perfect thing or keep them alive in the perfect way. And
Mm.
I love what you said about how like, yeah, you just do what you feel like doing. And I think honestly that speaks to what we were talking at the beginning of the conversation about self-care, right? Is just like going with your gut and, you know, honoring your own feelings. And if that means just like pretending that Father's Day isn't happening, or pretending that you guys used to just sit together and eat a pizza because that's what you feel like doing, I think that's perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, one of my questions was actually like, for me in the first couple of years, I felt this pressure to do the right thing, and like there's something I should be doing, but I could never figure it out. And then eventually I realized, oh, because there's nothing I should be doing. Like I should just be doing whatever feels right. There isn't some magical experience that I'm gonna have or do or create, or like you said, manufacture, because it does feel so artificial. To make this day the perfect version of whatever it's supposed to be. So thank you all for sharing that. I think sometimes it can be so helpful to actually hear someone say, Claire, like some years I just don't care. And it's okay to just not care, and to wake up Sunday and just like have your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, go to bed and wake up the next day and it doesn't matter. And that can be cool. Yeah, thank you. I'm curious, you know, as we're talking about the fact that like we're all remote, we're still doing this, we're still in the middle of like things opening up. Are any of you open to sharing how you've spent some Father's Days in the past, and doing those commemorative activities, rituals, practices, just to give people ideas if they feel like they might need them this year, particularly while alone or remote? Claire, I know you mentioned like just buying a card and writing in it, even if there's nowhere to send it. Yeah, just some of those ideas for people if you have them.
I started to like want to take back Mother's Day and Father's Day. Like I get to do this too. I get to buy a card. I get to like, you know, talk about my mom or my dad. And so I love the card thing. That's one of my go-tos, is to buy one, like really go and pick one out, pick out the card I would get him if he were still here, and then write something to him, you know, and that always feels good. It's important to me to share stories about him with my kids. So I talk about him a lot with them. That's a really important part for me. And other things I've done, you know, like go to a restaurant that he loved or that we used to go to, or cook something, or watch a favorite movie of his, just something that makes me feel connected to him in some way. One year on his death anniversary, I took a flight lesson. My dad had been a pilot, and I took a flight lesson, like a small airplane out of Santa Monica Airport, and it was so cool. And I I felt so close to him in that moment. It was like this thing that he had done in his whole life that I had really no idea about. And like sitting in the cockpit and looking at all these controls, I was like, wow, this was a huge part of my father's life. And it made me feel really close to him, which was cool because it had been like a decade at that point since he'd been gone. So things like that are the things that I lean towards.
I love that. So I was thinking about my dad. Last year was really strange because obviously we're in the middle of COVID, and so we weren't really able to sort of celebrate his life in a traditional way. And his service was sort of like no more than 10 people, which was basically, his wife, her daughter, my brothers, and a couple of friends. It was very limited. And so, like you, Claire, we decided to sort of deviate beyond Father's Day and sort of think, okay, what can we do that's something my dad would have loved? So he was like a Harley Davidson adventure seeker. He used to fly planes. And so that's sort of what we're doing this year. So I'm actually taking off this week to travel to Texas and to get involved in some adventure, which I won't say, but it's something my dad would have loved as a way to sort of keep his memory alive, and we can be closer to him.
Your dads had way cooler hobbies than my dad. It's amazing. And both of you, your fathers both flew planes. That's unbelievable. Wow. I mean, look, I have two little kids, like I mentioned at the top of this, and so much about Father's Day. My dad died right after my oldest son was born. And so, like, parenting and grieving were sort of enmeshed for me for the first, I mean, it still is, but especially the first year or two. And so, I've been trying really hard to, instead of experiencing Father's Day as a sad day, to focus on celebrating my husband to the extent that he wants to be celebrated, because he does not appreciate my extra tendencies. And so part of it is like just trying to give him a happy day. And part of it is, as Claire mentioned, I try to do things that my dad enjoyed, not flying any planes, but he had actually his own ritual for to commemorate the anniversary of his father's passing, which is he and my mom would always go out to a restaurant and drink my grandfather's favorite drink, which is a Manhattan. And they used toasted my grandpa Dan, right? And so that's what I've started doing for my father on any holidays that I feel like, that I especially feel his absence, right? So his birthday, which was July 4th. So that's kind of a weird one. But also on things like Father's Day and Christmas and Hanukkah, we'll have Manhattans and just sort of like do a little toast to dad. And that is something that was nice because it's something you can do at home. I didn't feel like I needed to kind of get out into the world and brave the virus in order to honor my father. It's just like a simple little thing that can happen at home. So that's definitely kind of the stuff that I'm reaching for these days. Maybe I should learn how to fly a plane though, you guys. Celebrate your fathers.
I love it. Yeah, we should all go learn how to fly planes just to celebrate everyone else's dad, because that sounds really badass. And just I think, thank you all for sharing all of that, because I think it's such a range of things. And I do appreciate as well, Dr. Harris, like, I don't know why you're sort of keeping it to yourself, but I think it's really beautiful that you are doing something that you can sort of bring up peripherally here, and something that you were just going to go share with your family and have with your family and have for yourself. And I'm really grateful for all of you sharing.
Can I add on that? So
Yeah.
it's this really weird thing. So last year, my brothers and I were sort of like, of course, sad that we weren't able to really commemorate my dad's life in a public way. But then it's almost become like this secret society where we're like, we're not telling anybody what we're doing. We, the three of us, are going to do it with our spouses and partners and so forth. And that's it. And so it's kind of a thing now, which sort of feels sacred. So I don't think that, I don't know, it's just, it sort of became this more sacred space as opposed to it being a place where we were angry. Now, I'm not going to lie, I definitely felt angry last year that we weren't able to have this big thing, because my dad, unlike your dad, Sarah, was flashy. And so he definitely would have wanted like cannons blazing, all kind of stuff. So we're gonna secretly do something that we think is gonna make him light up a lot this year. So
Fantastic. If you want any tips, let me know. I got a whole bag of tricks.
I love it. And like I appreciate that we're laughing right now, because I have these conversations sometimes and there is no laughter. And I wanted to actually talk about your book a little bit. So your book has been described everywhere as darkly funny. And I just really wanted to talk about how maybe you use laughter, comedy, that levity around holidays like this and just in general when it comes to grief, because I think it feels so good to laugh in these conversations sometimes. So I want to hear how you use it.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you're talking to me.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Totally funny, amazing. It was sort of ingrained in me at a young age to use humor and laughter and jokes to deflect from serious conversations. That's kind of the meat of my memoir anyway. And it's been good and bad, right? Like my family has some real work to do around communication, but it also has helped me to deal with difficult things and to diffuse difficult situations sometimes. And my dad did not ever want to sit around feeling bad for himself. So he had Alzheimer's disease, and his decline actually happened much, much faster than we thought it would. I thought I'd have 10, 15 years of my dad just sort of getting a little bit battier as time went on, and that was not the case. But he was very with it and would sort of make jokes at his own expense all the time, which was really helpful because he was sort of giving all of us permission to laugh too. And so a big kind of saving grace over the past 6 years now has been to just find things about my dad's life to laugh about, find things not about his death, but just about experiences that we had leading up to his death that were funny. Like my dad, he was in hospice toward the ends of his life, and my mom would bring him up. This is a very quick story, but my mom would bring him his favorite candies, which were Werther's Original, which are old man grandpa candies. I think Wilford Brimley is actually in the commercials for them. They're very old man candies, but he would have to be bribed to take his medication. So my mom would bring him these candies and be like, listen, if you take your pills, you can have a Werther's Original. And she showed up at hospice one day, and the nurse took her aside and begged her to please stop bringing the candy. And my mom was like, I'm so sorry. Is he eating too much sugar? I understand. He needs to be healthier. And the nurse was like, no, when he gets mad at somebody, he throws the candies at their faces. And if he hits them, he screams, yeah, motherfucker, in the middle of this hospice. And the nurse was like, it's really disruptive. Please stop, or bring softer foods, whatever. And so we were able to laugh at that. I actually told that story at his funeral, which is a very inappropriate place to say motherfucker, but what are you gonna do, right? You just have to kind of laugh about it. And so it was stories like that that made the pain of him being in hospice and needing to be bribed to take his medication just made them funny and gave them a human angle to them. I never wanted to remember my wonderful dad as just being this sick, dying person. So the ability to laugh about the things that he was doing that were legitimately funny just brought, I don't know, a whole different dimension to the grief process. And we were able to kind of tell funny stories about him in a way that he would have kind of been chuckling about too. I'm sorry, I just said motherfucker so many times, but I feel like it's a really good story.
One more. No, I really appreciate that. And it's something that you said that really sparked to me at the end, which is you were laughing about things that were genuinely funny. Yeah. And for me, I'm the things that were funny about my mom didn't stop being funny. I just for a little while felt the pressure I wasn't supposed to laugh at them, but they still are very funny stories. And it's beautiful to be able to call back to them and still relive that piece alongside all of the other crappy stuff that we have to remember and deal with. So no, thank you. Thank you for the language. Thank you for the laughs. That story was gold.
I think you do someone a disservice when you talk around who they are, or when you pretend oh, you're dying, that's so precious and serious. You can't possibly make mistakes or have a personality or do something embarrassing because oh, you're dying. So, we have to hold that space. And that's not true. People still are who they are. They're still funny. They're still jerks. They're still flawed, even if they're sick and dying, or even if they have died. And so I think it's important to just talk about and treat the people in your life the way that you would if they were just perfectly healthy and still around. And, my dad liked to joke. He loved telling terrible jokes, and he loved puns and wordplay and all that stuff. And I feel like continuing to do that stuff myself is a way to keep him alive. So, I'm always happy to laugh at him and tell more. I won't say the MF. I won't say it, but the more the merrier,
Sarah, I was waiting for it. When I was like, come on, just round home.
I promise you that the last thing that I say on this webinar that's for you, and I'll just close the computer.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Claire, we have a question for you to hear from you specifically about how you navigate this time of year, having lost both of your parents and going through, that swell around Mother's Day and the swell around Father's Day, and sort of just reflecting on how you manage that.
Yeah. Again, I feel like it's different every year, and it depends on the length out from the losses, because it just continues to change. It also depends on like various things that are happening in my life. I've had hard moments in my life that have exacerbated this time of year. And then I've had, years where I'm feeling really good, and this time of year doesn't feel that hard. So it's definitely different every year. Sometimes I get anxiety. Sometimes in years past, early on in the losses, I would often feel a lot of jealousy and resentment, which I think were the really difficult ones for me. Those were spaces I didn't like inhabiting, but I nonetheless would find myself in those places because it was hard not to. It was hard to see my friends being out with their families and their parents, and I was feeling very alone. I've lost both my parents. I'm an only child, and in the years before I got married and had my own children, just felt very a big lack of family in my life, and it was hard to not feel that jealousy and resentment in different places. And so that was something I struggled with. These days, it's kind of a little bit more what Sarah was saying. I feel like it's more of a balance now of celebrating the my kids' fathers, and making it a day that they enjoy as well. My kids love holidays. They love Mother's Day. They love Father's Day. They like to celebrate us. So it's kind of this balance of doing those things, and then also having a little reverence for the fact that my own parents aren't here too. And for me, again, my favorite thing is writing. I love to write to them. I love to write cards and letters, and just kind of, it feels different. It feels different than talking about them. It feels different than talking to them out loud. To sit down and write that, like, dear dad, like, happy Father's Day. I miss you. Here's what I miss about you. Here's how I'm doing. Here's what my kids are like. I find that very cathartic. It feels like I'm still really in communion with him, which is important to me. And then again, some years, like, I just don't want to care. I just really don't. I just want to like move through this, get to Monday, and be done. And so, but again, I do think that for me, one of the things that's been helpful is to let people around me know that sometimes this is a hard year for me. I think we all know, if you haven't been through loss, you don't get it. You have no idea what it really feels like. And so just kind of letting people know here and there, like, hey, Father's Day is coming up. It's kind of a tough weekend for me. And people want to be supportive. The people that we love and are friends with often want to be supportive. So it's nice to do that, and then just have them check in with you and give you a little extra love. And I think sometimes we just need to remember to ask for that. That's kind of all my things, I think.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That support piece actually plays directly into the question that I had for Dr. Mikhail. You wrote recently on Instagram about supporting others through their grief. And you wrote, here's a simple truth to remember as you offer support. Your discomfort is real, and so is the grieving person's grief. And I wanted to touch just a little bit tonight on that, the fact that there are support systems potentially watching this. There are people that are supporting someone through a tough Father's Day. There's some people here who probably are experiencing a tough Father's Day and supporting someone else. So really, I just wanted to hear you expand a little bit more on that quote, because I was like, oh, you're just saying that everything that everyone is feeling is valid, and that can be really important to hear sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think obviously there's pressure on the grieving person to sort of navigate this in the right way, whatever that is. That's completely ridiculous, but there is no right way. But there's also pressure on the person supporting the grieving person to not mess up. And in this blog that you're referring to, I'm sort of talking about these questions that people who are support persons, I am one, so I'm a grieving person, but I also offer support to people who are grieving. And so there's always these questions. Am I going to get it wrong? What if I say the wrong thing? How do I fix it? And so just remembering that in that, it's okay to name the fact that you as a support person are uncomfortable, because grief it's messy and it's complicated and it can be overwhelming even to the support person. So one of the other tools that I offer in this blog is to remember that even as you support person, it's okay to invite your own support, right? To know that it's okay as you're leaning in towards the person grieving to lean against someone else, so that you too don't feel like you have to navigate that alone, because we all need each other. I mean, at the end of the day, we're the whole village and we've got to support each other as each of us grieves. So, yeah, thank you for referring to that.
Of course. I
Yeah.
really appreciated it. My husband and I just had a conversation. I'm doing an audio project right now, and I just interviewed him for the first time ever in our relationship yesterday. And I was like, what's hard about grief? What's hard about seeing me crying on the couch every day? And he was like, one of the best things about it is like figuring out how he takes care of himself and finds his own support while he's supporting me. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And to not feel guilty about
And
that.
not feel guilty. Like
Not to
we all
feel,
need
yeah,
support.
we all
Yeah.
need support. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm curious, just in these last couple minutes, if there are things in a moment of vulnerability from the three of you that you ask for at this time of year during Father's Day, that maybe just to sort of model for people on the call what they could maybe be asking for, what they could ask of their support systems, what they get vulnerable, like what you get vulnerable about yourself and ask your partners, your community, et cetera, for.
I'll start. So I love hearing stories about my dad. Partly because, as I mentioned, he liked being the center of attention, let's just face it. And so doing that, talking about him, it just sort of holds him up in that light. And so one of the things that I will ask, this last week, I actually sent emails to several of my friends and several of my dad's friends. And I was like, hey, if there's something that pops up this week, or even a memory or something that you haven't shared about him, email it to us so that we can sort of just know. And it's just hilarious to hear all these different things about my dad that I knew, and some, funny and not so funny things that I didn't know. But yeah, just asking people to speak his name. I find that very valuable, and it helps me remember that, like, not only did my dad die, but more importantly, he lived. And talking about him for me keeps his legacy and his memory alive. So that's really special.
I'm going to throw this question out real quick just because someone did ask a question and I want to get it in. The question is, how can I balance my grief, anger, and jealousy of others that my dad isn't here while also celebrating my husband? They said my dad passed unexpectedly in November 2020 while I was 7 months pregnant, and it's their husband's first Father's Day, and they're already dreading it and wish they didn't have to celebrate. So do any of you have advice?
I saw that question.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to remember that you don't have to pick one thing. You don't have to just be showing up for your husband and celebrating Father's Day and like putting your grief to the side. And then you also don't have to be just grieving and angry and resentful. You can hold multitudes. And you can go through mixed emotions all through the day. I think being honest and upfront with the people in your life that it's a really tough day for you, and you also with your husband that you want to celebrate him, but it's going to be a tough day. And I think I love what Dr. Meikle said about asking people to share memories, just really asking for that kind of support, letting people know. It's so hard. But I think also showing up here and doing things like this, the way that the thing that changed my jealousy and resentment more than anything else was to find people who understood what I felt. And that was coming to communities like this. That was meant going to therapy and counseling, and meant meeting other people who were grieving and who were, going through parent loss, because I felt so alone and so angry and so resentful. And this was what changed for me. So I'm glad you're here. Sorry about this weekend.
And
Now,
go
oh,
ahead, Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just gonna say I can relate to this question so much because my father died right after my husband. So my son was born in January. My father got like super sick in May and then had died by July. And so I kind of felt like all those first, as I said before, Dr. Harris, that first year of milestones was so gut wrenching as a
Mhm.
grieving daughter. And then as a new parent, there were all those milestones that were horrible because I felt like guilty for finding joy in my son's firsts. And it took me a long time to accept that I could feel joy and it wasn't a betrayal of my father, a betrayal of my grieving
Yeah.
process. So, just give yourself permission, like Claire was saying, give yourself permission to feel, to experience multitudes. You can be sad and angry and jealous. That's fine. It doesn't make you a bad person or a bad mother. It just makes you a
Mhm.
human being who's experiencing a confluence of like very big emotions, both
Yeah.
positive and negative. And I wish that I had given myself that permission as a new mother. I will say something I started doing, I did not do on the first Father's Day, but I started doing later was for big holidays where either my husband or my children should have been the focus of the day, but I found myself confused or consumed by feelings about my dad. I literally gave myself an hour, like I designated an hour of the day to just lock myself away and like cry and be angry. And everybody knew, like, don't bother her this hour because this is her hour she's taking to just like feel the things. And that was really helpful. It's like a strange habit, I guess, or a strange thing to establish of like needing this hour of crying in the bathroom time. But it helped me to compartmentalize things a bit. But yeah, don't add guilt on top of all the things that you're feeling because you don't need to feel it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, it's okay to carve out time for yourself to just sit with whatever feelings come up and to let people know, hey, I need, like Sarah said, an hour, 30 minutes, whatever that is. And then also want to speak to you. The question was, how do you balance all these emotions? And I would love for you to liberate yourself and recognize the fact that balance is a myth, right? Like when I think about balance, it's like, how can I be equally angry and equally joyful? And the truth is, it's okay. It's okay if it doesn't happen that way. You might experience jealousy and anger throughout the day. And to name that as opposed to thinking, oh my God, I've got to fit in 40% of joy, right? To balance off how pissed off I was earlier in the day. And so to really just honor wherever you are and to carve out that time to really sit with your emotions, whatever they may be.
Thank you all so much. And I'm just really grateful for you showing up, for answering all of these questions, for being vulnerable, and for everyone. But just want to say thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa, for just allowing this platform and holding space for us tonight.
Yeah.
Always, always. That's what I'm here for. So thanks. Have a really good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.